know what she said. She might just change your life.
Joining us in studio is Joanne Stewart, partners at Learners LLP in Toronto. And Joanne, we're talking about what you deal with all the time, which is what happens when a relationship breaks down.
Yes.
What in the world do you tell people?
The first thing I tell people is to take a deep breath. Don't make any immediate decisions. Probably talk to somebody, get some counseling.
Have
and
some
I mean
Tylenol.
That. Have some
Get some
Tylenol.
drugs.
Other things I might say too, but I wouldn't say
Have
on
a
the
drink.
radio. Have a drink, a good strong one.
But a lawyer isn't necessarily the first person you should talk to.
That's correct. I agree with that. Not a lawyer necessarily. I think counseling a lot of the time, so you can go and talk about how you feel, what's going on, how you're going to react to it all, so you get your head and the rest of you sorted out, and then you can talk to a lawyer too. But really, you need to sort yourself out.
Well, I'm just going to ask you about that because I have known people who didn't talk to a lawyer first. So they tried to kind of work it out. They talked to their friends, they talked to a counselor, and then they found out that the other person had made some strategic moves that they were not aware of. So they had no kind of warning that if they needed to take some money out of the checking account, or they didn't, and they were just blindsided. So are you sure that you shouldn't kind of have a quick check with the lawyer before you start proceedings?
I think that's a timing issue. When I say see a counselor and don't see a lawyer first, I don't mean wait 6 months or necessarily even wait 3 weeks. But I think that in tandem you have to deal with yourself, which is the counseling aspect, and then the legal advice goes along with that. But the problem with the legal advice, if you can't get your head around it, is that everything you hear is lost or misheard. So the processes can parallel, but I think still the first hit would be a counselor, and maybe in a week or 10 days or whatever, a lawyer. If somebody cleans out a bank account within a week or 10 days, if you're with a spouse who does that, then you're into it, and then you're going to really need some counseling, I think, because there's going to be a whole fallout of that will be complicated in law, as a result of which makes it complicated in life.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense, although my instinct would be before I actually decided and actually said to somebody, okay, we're getting a divorce, I would be seeing a lawyer and getting all my ducks in a row.
Okay,
but I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say we're getting a divorce without seeing a lawyer. I'm saying if you're people call it gobsmacked, somebody walks in and says, okay, this is what I think we're going to do, or you can feel it, you're the gobsmacked one. People who plan to separate typically see lawyers, but they've already gone through the I made my peace with it phase. So the one who wants to leave knows what he or she is going to do. The one who receives it and is not slapped across the face, but is blindsided by it, has to both get counseling and the legal advice. But the blindsiding makes the mind and the heart go crazy. So the legal advice becomes, it's necessary, but it's not always heard.
So I can't tell you the number of times that I've had couples tell me that they're splitting up, and then generally the guy, come to think of it, says, well, you must have been able to tell something was wrong. Yeah. And not only are my husband and I going, like, no, we actually never noticed anything was wrong. The wife is saying, I didn't know anything was wrong. Yes. So what happens when somebody walks in and gobsmacks you and says, I want a divorce, I've called a lawyer, this is what we're doing. Then, as you're dealing with that, I had no idea that, your first instinct is, okay, they're saying, I've called a lawyer. So is a lawyer somebody that can help navigate you towards the right kind of counseling that you would need to go through first?
Yes, you can get that from a lawyer, too, depending on the lawyer you go to. Mm-hmm. So ladies are convincing me maybe it's all about the lawyers first. I listen to you. Okay, go to the lawyer first, because there's truth in that. The lawyer can guide you to counseling, too. But the people hear lawyers and family law and they think, oh, my God, suddenly it's going to be a big fight, which it's not necessarily, but it may be. So I don't...
Yeah, I think if I was gobsmacked like that, the first thing I would do is call my lawyer and say, what do I need to know? What do I need to do or know to protect myself? I'll talk to you later about the other stuff down the road, but I think I would go into shock and then I become practical. So then I become just a cerebral being for a minute. And my lawyer would say, do this, or don't do this, and then I would do that, and then I would go back to, oh my God, I can't believe this happened.
Yeah, and that's probably quite right, actually. But the listening audience doesn't know I came in and said when I'm calling at my brain now, I say hello, and my brain says not now. So maybe that's why my answer today was maybe it should be the lawyer. I'm going to go with the lawyer. Let's go to the lawyer first. The lawyer will assist with all matters.
Just briefly, not a long negotiation.
Well, they could tell you what to do.
They can tell you what to do.
I mean,
that's true.
we always hear, like if that happens, the first thing is like, well, who's moving out? Well, probably nobody.
Nobody's going anywhere. That's the first thing that we would say. You don't go in unless you're going to get hurt. If you're going to get physically beat up, then somebody needs to leave usually. But to leave your house is a difficult thing because it sets a tone and a trend. And I think if you're a person who doesn't want to separate, then you might say, well, I'm not going anywhere. So I don't know what that's going to look like. So stand your ground, hold your ground. I love you, I love the family, I love this, I love that, and I'm not going anywhere, so too bad for you. So there is that, too.
I'd be grabbing some money to make sure that my kids were
if
looked after.
Yes.
But
and then give it back if the person was going to be reasonable, because I don't know if they've got somebody else standing in the wings that they want to, get rid of me and...
Yeah, but if you want to save the marriage because you were gobsmacked, there are other things like sometimes there's just like talking through it, or going to counseling, or suggesting going to counseling, or admitting that you're not going anywhere, so you're going to have to work through this, and saying that the family is important to you and that's what you want to stick with. I mean, how often can you change somebody's mind? And I use that term. I mean, if he comes in and says, like, that's it, it's done, and you say, well, I'm not going anywhere, you're not going anywhere, so let's try to work this through. Mm-hmm. And lots of guys in particular have no intention of going to counseling because they just don't believe in it.
Right, but a lot of times, and particularly in long-term marriages, it gets worked through. Because I think, particularly with men, too, who seem to be more, what's the word for it?
Stubborn?
Stubborn, okay. That's a good word.
Pig-headed? No,
that too. They can see, as they get older, I had a former law partner who's now in his late 70s, and he said men didn't actually come into their own and be real men until they were into their 60s, because before that they're so self-centered and egotistical and narcissistic. And he really went on about his own... Is man a gender? Is that a gender?
Yeah.
If you're a male, okay.
Male,
a gender.
Male, female.
Yeah. So in that theory, if the person is older and if there's longevity to a relationship and it's not perfect, oh well, because we all know that relationships aren't perfect anyway. Like your girlfriends or your kids or your business partner, nothing's perfect. So if you can get into the longevity thing, I think a lot of couples move past it. We have a lot of friends who are couples and in long-term marriages, none of which are perfect. There have been ups and downs and things.
I think sometimes, though, when people say it's over, it's a cry for it really, because they've tried to say before, we should talk about this, and maybe things get busy and you don't realize there's a sense of urgency. So maybe when they say, you know what, it's over, what they're really saying is, we need to fix this.
Right. Yeah, or take it
in
another direction. Happens a lot, actually. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
So really. if you decide that you are going to unwind everything, your relationship, is it always necessary to go to court, or are there other things like mediation or a new term, collaborative law? Explain that.
Collaborative law is it's an area of law that started out in California, and it was started by a man named Stu Webb, who had been married and divorced himself, I think 3 times, he says. Okay. He's an alcoholic. And he finally got up one day, a family law lawyer, and said, I can't do this anymore. I'm not listening to it. It's too much fighting. The conflict doesn't help anything. So he started this thing called collaborative law. And it's a movement that's it's trying to be moved forward really around the world. Mm-hmm. And what it requires is that lawyers and the parties, the couple, works together. You sign an agreement, so nobody will ever go to court, including the lawyers. And there are all kinds of helping professionals brought in, if necessary, to assist with the process, whether it's for finances, parenting, whatever. And it's a very strong movement and works very well for some people.
But not good for everyone?
Well, I don't think so, but it's interesting because a lot of the collaborative lawyers, you have to get certain qualifications to do that, which I've done. But many collaborative lawyers only practice collaborative law. So from my perspective, unlike theirs, it's sometimes like taking a family that's square and putting them in the round hole, literally, and you're trying to fit them in because one person really doesn't want to collaborate. They don't want to be participatory in a cooperative way. They want to fight. So if you have one person say, I'd like to cooperate, and the other person say, I want to fight, it becomes very difficult. And I've experienced difficult clients, particularly men, who wish to use a collaborative process to push around their wife who is not as strong. So they choose that process thinking they can really work it, and they can if they get a seasoned lawyer and the wife, say, has a more, not lovely person, but a person who's a little less naive. She might end up with a collaborative deal that's binding in law but not so great because he used it. That's not the intent of the process, but it happens.
We are speaking with Joanne Stewart, family lawyer from Learners Lawyers LLP, about, we're talking about collaborative law right now, and what happens when a marriage breaks down. So you've gone through the courses, you're trained in this collaborative law.
Yes.
But it doesn't sound like you're an out-and-out fan. So do you adjust the methods that you use to suit the client that you have?
I think that in my world, clients should be told with the various alternatives for process and can choose based on their own circumstances and what they're comfortable with. A true collaborative lawyer believes that collaborative law works for everyone, and we need to, as we improve our skill set, then we can make it work. And that could be true. It could be true. Active listening and all of those things I've not been well trained in, so it's harder for me.
Let me ask you this. In collaborative...
You're a lawyer. You like to hear yourself talk.
That's right. It's true, and that's what we get told to do.
It's true. Sorry, it's just the way she said it. I'm not a good listener. I'm not
the active listening. I heard you say, I feel you're this and that. You know, the I feel statements, I have to really work on those. Because lawyers are told you don't feel anything. You say, I think, I submit, blah, 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 but I'm not feeling things. So that part of the training is really lacking in people my age.
So my question would be, if you choose collaborative law, it's one of the alternatives, can you then sign a deal that doesn't conform to the family law in Ontario? Because you're collaborating and you're really making your own deal, and you've vowed not to go to court. For example, no judge will ever let somebody off child support.
Arguably not, yes.
But you could sign that.
Yes, but you can always do that. You can always make a deal that's special to you regardless of the process that may not comply with what the law is. The risk you run is if one of the people wises up later and says, oh, no, that's not what I really meant, and tries to get out of it, becomes problematic.
So it can be appealed.
No, that's not the technical word, but you can get into it again. There's different alternatives.
You can open it up, and that is what is happening sometimes, and people just that's the worst nightmare. You sign a deal and then you go back. And family lawyers I've heard often say, this is the only contract in the world that's reopened. If it was a business contract, it would be done.
That's correct.
Like
that
prenups, for example.
Yes.
That don't stand.
They don't, because things happen that nobody predicted.
Right.
So what's private court?
Private court is an arbitration. When you hire, it's a private process, it's confidential. You hire a person to make decisions for you, and that person has the same authority really as a judge. The person is called an arbitrator. It's extremely popular in Toronto now with a lot of families, because it allows, there's laws that deal with how arbitrations are conducted, but you can, within an arbitration, set your own rules. You can set your own timelines. You don't have to wait around for 6 hours or 4 hours for the judge who's doing 12 things that day. You have your person who's dedicated to you, who may have a skill set that allows him or her to deal with the issue that's in front of him or her. The people.
So you're paying your lawyers, and then you're hiring the arbitrator.
That's right. You pay the arbitrator, and you pay the arbitrator for the arbitrator's room and the coffee and all of those things. They're usually disbursements.
And the donuts, okay.
Yeah.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.